Hi, you're listening to Phil DeBella, and this is FlashCast by PDB. And today I'm going to tackle the word failure. You heard it, failure. And let me say from the onset that if you've never failed in life, then you're not pushing hard enough. And if you've never failed in life, then maybe you need a reality check, because I don't believe that anybody in life has gone through life without a failure. So you know what? We're going to talk about failure is a learning ground for success. So from failure, you learn to succeed. And I'm going to talk about it in the professional sense, and also going to tackle a few things about teaching kids to learn from failure, which breaks it right down. And as you know, I like to talk about personal, professional, and family. So I like to tackle a little bit of everything of the three areas when we're talking about topics like this. So simply put, we all fail. I've failed many times. I don't believe anyone goes about to fail. Because if you know that it's wrong, then you won't do it. It's pretty simple. So to me, we fail when we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what the outcome was. So the intention is not to fail. The intention was to actually have a go to succeed. But for some reason it didn't. And when it doesn't, it's the time to stop, assess, and learn. So the format I'm going to talk about is failure, learning, to succeed. So from failure, you learn to succeed. And how do we do that? Well, number one, you got to take the risk and pay the price. Now, taking the risk and paying the price comes into what I talk about being comfortable with your worst possible scenario. So if you're ever not sure on what can happen, and to make sure how do you protect yourself from failure to be detrimental, then that's the key, is get comfortable with your worst possible scenario. Be prepared that if things go wrong, because you're about to take a risk, that you are able to pay the price. And it's very simple. And the moment you do this, then if you happen to fail, you will learn and you will become a success. So not everything we try is going to work the first time. Understanding why it doesn't work then sets us up to succeed. Now, at DeBella Coffee, I went on in 2002 to open a startup business to go on to be one of the biggest, the biggest in its like for like in the country, and then I sold it. And I was fortunate enough that I succeeded with my first business venture, but I only succeeded because I was able to work in a business that failed. I worked in a business that was a cafe. It roasted its own coffee. It went on to roast coffee for other cafes and build a supply business, all the rest of it. However, it failed in many ways. It didn't look after its people, it didn't reinvest its money, didn't reinvest in technology. The list goes on. I was able to observe failure from afar and learn from it, so that when I went on to open my own business, I knew what didn't work and what did work, and I could apply it. Had I not been in that environment, had I not worked in a business prior that had failed in so many areas, then there's a great chance, and I believe 100% chance, that I would not have been able to build the company that I did, because learning from what not to do in business by watching somebody else enabled me to succeed in my own. So whilst it wasn't me personally that failed, I was able to observe the failings of this business and where it was doing things wrong and where it was doing things right. But in terms of where it did things wrong, I was able to learn and then go on and succeed, right? And what I learned was that it is okay to fail. And I went on to teach many of my staff, and of course I went from a startup to having over 100 people at DeBella Coffee. And I said to people, it's okay to fail, as long as you know that the intention is not to fail on purpose. So, make sure that you plan out what it is you're doing. You're comfortable with your worst possible scenario of what can go wrong, and then go full steam ahead, knowing that if it doesn't work, that you will stop, assess, and learn so that you can go on to be a success. I believe that experience is the best teacher. So real experience, not learning things from a book, reading something, then applying it, and it might not work. Learn why it doesn't work and then reapply to succeed. Real experience is always going to teach us best. Especially for me, I'm an auditory and visual learner. That's how I learn best. And therefore, for me, I need to attempt things. And when they don't work, I can go on to learn from it and then succeed. But I've got to allow myself the freedom to fail. And that's things I've done. I've invested in ventures that I shouldn't have, but I didn't know at the time that I shouldn't have. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. I've invested in last year. I had a venture that cost me over $700,000 that, as I was doing it, I thought I was doing everything the right way, but I didn't. And what I learned from it was it's about investing in the right people. It's about making sure that you're operating in the right environment and understanding what the worst possible scenario is. And I learned this from investing in a venture that went wrong. Now, when I invested in it, I wasn't intentionally company going to fail or didn't think it would fail. But there was things that I learned from it, such as I stayed hands off. I didn't get involved as much as I should have. I didn't say no when I should have said no. These are the things that I learned. And more importantly, what I learned is that any future investments will be things that I can control or have some control over. And these are things that I've learned moving forward from that one failed business venture. What I don't do is I make sure that I'm not scared of failing. I understand that a lot of people are scared to fail, and the moment that you go into this frightness or fear mode of failing, I think you stifle yourself. We start to put limitations on ourselves. Now, that's easier said than done, but I always come back to being comfortable with my worst possible scenario. This enables me to welcome failure. If I'm comfortable with my worst possible scenario, then I'm able to really welcome failure and understand it. And of course, understand, and I keep saying that the intention is not to fail. The intention is always to succeed, but understanding that at times we will fail. We will fail in relationships. We will fail in business ventures. We will fail in looking after ourselves and not drinking or not partying too hard. Whatever it is, we will fail. It's what we stop, assess and learn that will then catapult us to success. So we need to break down the whys and hows and the whats of why we failed, learn from it so that we can then turn a failure into success. Switching over to kids, something that obviously having a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old myself, a daughter is 12 and my boy is 10, is really understanding how do we get them to understand failure, to not be scared of it. And I'm doing it from a young age where I actually reframe, and redefine the term failure to learning opportunity. When things go wrong, it's your opportunity to learn from it. It's your opportunity to then provide a success formula to it. So redefining and reframing the word failure to actually not be a negative word. I mean, through COVID, we talked about obviously the impact of COVID, the impact of people all over the world, personally, professionally, from a family perspective. But what we did was we really my wife and I, Joanna, sat down and spoke to the kids about the learning opportunity from what was happening with COVID so that we could use the environment and the timings, what was happening at the time, to redirect a negative word of failure into a positive word of learning opportunity. It also then talked about problem solving, and I talk about the best businesses solves problems. So when something is failing or there's failure that is occurring, there's an opportunity to build something that's going to problem solve, and that's where a lot of business comes out of. And then the third thing we talk about, which is important in everyday life, is resilience. So failure and redirecting the concept of failure and helping people understand that failure gives an opportunity to problem solve goes on to build and promote the word of resilience. And we all know how important that word resilience is to breed to kids at a young age. And it's important, obviously, at a young age so that they can go on through life and be forever resilient. And that's something with the more resources we have around us, and our children have resources we didn't have, and we've got resources our parents didn't have, I find that it's more important to ensure that we are building and promoting resilience. And that's going to be a fundamental key in helping people to deal with failure. And you'll find those that are most resilient are able to cope with failure better than others. And understanding, they're the ones that will understand that failure is the opportunity and road to success. So it's really important, and something that I believe that we need to be spending more time with our children, with ourselves, and obviously with our peers in our workplace, or if you lead a team, with your team. And it's something that I get talked about, leadership. How can you become a better leader, and talk about failure? And what I say to people is to confront failure and learn from it. I always said to my team, as long as your intentions are good, your intention is not to fail, you understand what your worst possible scenario is, I want you to take it head on and go for it, and learn. Make sure that you're constantly assessing, making sure that you're constantly communicating with your team, making sure that everyone's intention is about making the business better, that failure is learned, is analysed so that you could learn to make the business better. And I keep coming up with the same words, that intention word. What is somebody's intention? If they intended to fail, then we have a problem. If their intention was to make the business better, then we don't have a problem. We have an opportunity to learn. Trust your gut. There's been many times that I've thought something wouldn't work, but I've allowed people to trust their gut, their instincts to make better decisions. And it's worked, because I don't have all the answers. Leadership is not about you having all the answers. Leadership is about empowering people and taking them on the journey with you, with one shared vision, but multiple ways to achieve that vision. And you need to trust people to trust their gut to make more decisions, which means you need to let them feel empowered. Second chances is what it's all about. It's not a mistake unless you're repeating it 3 or 4 or 5 times. First time your intention was good, you didn't know it was a mistake. The second time you learn from it, you can apply different things. These are all the things that are important in leadership. Let people be who they are. Let them go after what they need to. Make sure you do that with yourself. The fundamental, in summary, is be comfortable with your worst possible scenario, understand what the worst thing that can possibly happen, get comfortable with it, and then go ahead. Your intention is not to fail, your intention is to succeed. Use that failure as an opportunity to learn so that you can be a great success. You've been listening to Phil DiBella, and this is FlashCast by PDB.